Good afternoon, everyone. Let's start off from where we left. So last class on Thursday, we started going through bull and bear market. We understood what a bull market is, how the term is used, what do they mean when they use the term bullish outlook. They have a positive sentiment when they use the word bullish or bull market. They expect the market to perform well. They expect the economy to perform well. So it's a positive sentiment whenever they describe something with the word bullish or bull. If they use the word bear, what they're referring to is a negative sentiment. They expect the market to have a decline, have a downfall, economy to be at a recession or a declining stage. That's what they refer to as a bear market or a bearish outlook. It's quite difficult for any investor to earn a return at a bearish market. What happens is it's a decline, right? So the stock price today is higher than the stock price that's going to be tomorrow. So tomorrow is going to be even lesser. Usually investors buy today expecting that tomorrow it will have a higher price. That is their sentiment. Okay. But what happens here is the other way about. So from today, if I buy, tomorrow the stock price is going to decline. So the investor is exposed to a loss situation. Okay. Usually in the practical world, how they trade in a bear market is in a bull market, they usually cash in their profit. Bull market is when the market is on an increasing trend. Okay. So when it's increasing, rather than holding to the increasing stock for a further increase, most of the investors, what they go for is a take profit scenario. Remember the take profit order that we discussed? So usually what they do is they think, okay, this is sufficient income for us. Let's cash in. Let's sell it at this point rather than waiting for the price to increase further. What if it falls? Thinking about a possible fall in the future, they cash in the unrealized profit and they hold the cash until the market has a downfall. So when a bullish market turns into a bear market, at that point, most of the investors go to buy stocks. Why? The stocks are declining at a rapid rate most of the time. So at that point, they buy again at even favorable prices. So usually a bearish market is a collection, is a market where investors collect their stocks. Okay. So even though they collect, they make the profit in the bullish trend, in the bullish scenario. Okay. But this technique called short selling allows the investor to make a profit while in a bear market. That's the speciality of that strategy, of that technique. So then we saw what short selling is. Remember, I told you why this is important for us. The last year, end of it, somewhere close to September, our stock exchange declared that they are planning to introduce short selling in our country as well. That's one reason why you need to have a thorough knowledge on this. And the other is, in January of this year, globally, there was a huge impact coming from this short selling strategy. What was that stock? It's called the stock, or the company's name was GameStop Corporation. Okay, that was a company engaging in manufacturing and selling video games related products. And their stock got so famous. If you go to Google and type GameStop short selling, you'll be able to have a good read on that. Okay, what happens in short selling is, in a bearish market, the investor who expects the stock price to decline further. Now, be careful of the words that you're going to use. it has to be a bear market. The investor who's going to use this strategy called short selling is thinking or is expecting the market to have this decline for some time. In the future, the declining trend is going to continue. Speculating that trend, he gets into this short selling strategy. So day one, he will borrow the stock from another investor for a fee. The initial point is borrowing. Remember the word, they are not purchasing it. They will borrow the stock from another investor. Let's say you are the other investor and I want to do short selling. I will approach you and I will ask for one share that you're currently holding. You are the owner of the stock. For the short time, I'm borrowing it from you. Okay, so I will borrow that one share, promising you I will pay you a fee, let's say 2 rupees, just for a 10 rupee stock. I will pay you 2 rupees and I will return this stock at the end of this month. Let's say I'm purchasing it today. Sorry, I'm borrowing it today. Okay, I'm borrowing it today for a 2 rupee fee. My returning date is March 31st. The day I borrow, the stock's price was 10 rupees. I would immediately, after borrowing, I would immediately sell that stock in the market. Why? Today's price is 10 rupees. I am thinking, my forecast is price is going to decline further. So tomorrow if I go to sell, it might be lesser than that. I would immediately sell the stock that I borrowed. What would I do next? I have 10 rupees with me. I will have that 10 rupees with me until the date I have to return back to the investor. So March 31st, I have 10 rupees. When I approach the market, my speculation has been correct in the bear market where the prices have been declining. The 10 rupee stock today, March 31st, has reached, let's say, 4 rupees. Okay. So March 31st, using my 10 rupees, I will buy the 4 rupee share. I just need to buy one share to return. So I will buy that share for 4 rupees, come back to you, return that one share to you. Now it's 4 rupees. I will return that share to you and I will give you 2 rupees. So totally, what is my cost? 6 rupees. Using 10 rupees, I gave you 6 and I end up with a profit of 4 rupees. Why is that profit important? I made that profit 4 rupees in a scenario where the market is having a downfall. You as an investor had a 10 rupee stock going down to 4 rupees, had a loss of 6 rupees. When all the others had a loss, I used the short selling and earned a profit in that scenario. That's why this technique is very special. But the disadvantage or the the challenge of using the short selling technique is what happened in January in the GameStop share. What happened? So many investors exercised this short selling. They were sure that GameStop shares are going to have a downfall. Why? The company was performing very bad. Hence, it was an obvious call that the stock is going to have a downfall. But moment they collected it, they have some disclosures to make. So when they made the disclosures that they hold this much of shares of this company under a borrowing term. Okay, remember it's short selling. So they have to borrow that stock. Under borrowing terms, they hold these much of shares of GameStop for this period of time. Certain group of organized people like on Reddit, but Reddit was the social media platform, a platform like Facebook, if you want to just imagine, they read about these disclosures, they identified that. So to to take revenge over the wealthy or to have such kind of an attitude, they together organized and started demanding for that stock in the market. So that led to the increase in the GameStop prices. I showed you the graph last Sunday, Thursday as well. The GameStop share had its all-time high since the stock was listed in the New York Stock Exchange. It had its highest price of reaching $300. So the short sellers were at a disadvantage where they had to return at a certain date. And on that certain date, the stock price they thought is going to be at a lower price than what they borrowed for. But it ended up being nearly 1,000 times higher. So they had to put in their own money, buy that stock and return to the relevant investor. Okay, so this had a lot of mutual funds, lot of big corporates, high net worths who were using this strategy to end up at a massive loss. So understand the flip side of using the short selling as well. The brighter side is it will get you enormous profit in a bear market, but flip side is if the pattern changes, the investor is exposed to a massive risk. Okay, that's why it's important. Then we saw what a stock symbol is, how we could recognize shares with their respective stock symbols, and then we moved on to the trade orders. We saw that market order gave us the trade certainty. We know that the transaction will get executed, but we didn't know the price until the trade happened. Why? You're buying it at the ongoing current price in the market. So you might call your broker or enter your quote to the platform, to the stock trading platform. Still, at the moment it gets affected, the price could be a bit higher. Okay, so price certainty is not available, but execution certainty is available in a market order. What happens in limit order is the very opposite of it. Limit order, you have price certainty. You don't have to wait until the trade happens for you to know the price of your stocks. You are giving a limit to your broker. You are telling your broker to act within the limits. So you know this is the maximum or this is the minimum that your broker is going to execute for. Okay, but you don't have the execution certainty. You don't know when that trade will get effected. That is what a limit order is. Limit buy order and limit sell order are two types of limit orders which are like the branches of the limit order. Then we have fill or kill day order and the good till cancel order. Now I want you to remember market order, limit order, even stop loss and take profit are ways that you describe on how you have fed or instructed your broker to act. Okay, it depends on your instruction to the broker to act. But fill or kill order, day order, good till cancel order are going to determine the validity of your order. How long is this order going to be valid? Is it immediate? Is it for a day? Is it until the investor cancels? Okay, just the summary for you. So fill or kill order is you will put an order, you expect your broker to fill the order completely and immediately. Okay, if they are unable to do both of them or either, you will cancel the order. What is a day order? You will put an order with your broker, but you inform your broker it's a day order. Or the standard understanding between an investor and a broker is any order is for a day order. Okay, so that means it's only valid during the trading hours of that particular day, 11 to 2:30 in terms of Sri Lanka. Earlier it was 9:30 to 2:30. Okay. Good till cancelled order. It's an order which is valid until the investor, him or herself, calls the broker and informs, look here, let's cancel the order. Until then, the order given is valid. It's an open order. Okay. So that is on a theoretical basis. Practically, if you are trading in our stock exchange, you should know good till cancelled order is only valid for 5 days. Why do they have it? Because those are electronic platforms that you have to insert your orders. You can't have a lot of open orders for certain stocks. So they usually give a benchmark of 5 days. So 5 trading days is the validity period for a good till cancelled order in the practical scenario. Theoretically, we believe that it's valid until the investor again instructs the broker to cancel that order. Okay. Then you have stop loss order and the take profit order. Now I told you, just like limit and market order, these are a type of an order. The way you give the order to the broker is a bit different. Apart from that, what makes stop loss and take profit order a bit different is that both these orders are trying to be on a conservative ground. On a stop loss order, you're trying to minimize your loss. That's given. On a take profit order, you are happy with a certain level of profit. You can hold until the price reaches its peak, but rather than waiting for that, you are comfortable with the profit that you earn for. So you want to realize your profit and get out. Both of these indicate a conservativeness towards the market strategy. So stop loss order, the objective is minimize my loss. So if it's a sell order that you're giving your broker, your stop loss order would be below the current price. I hope, are there any doubts? Okay. I am unable to get anyone in. I think you need to check with the institute. They should be the ones who let you in for the class. If you have any doubts, just drop the message onto the chat area. I'll have a look at it. So in the stop loss order, especially when you're trying to sell, what is your objective? You want to get the highest price, right? You're trying to sell your share at the highest price possible. That's the objective. Okay. But what is a loss scenario when it comes to selling? Let's say today the stock price was 100 rupees, but I'm still holding it without selling. I bought the stock at 60 rupees. Today the share price is 100 rupees. Okay. I could have sold it today and got out with 40 rupees profit. But I'm still holding, thinking, no, it will reach 110. It will reach 120. I will get even higher profit. Okay. But let's say tomorrow it takes a U-turn and ends up at 90. So to the seller, the loss that comes from the price coming down from 100 to 90 is also a type of a loss. Why? Earlier, he or she could have made 40 rupees per share. Now, his or her is only going to end up with 30 rupees per share. That is also a kind of a loss. Okay. So in this stop loss order, you're trying to stop that loss. Because you believe if you don't stop it at that scenario, the loss is going to get bigger and bigger. Tomorrow, it might come to 80. Day after tomorrow, 70. And then the day after that, it'll end up at 60, where you have no profit or a loss. Technically, when you compare 60 to 60, no profit, no loss. But you know the price went all the way up to 100. You lost that opportunity. That will be your loss as well. Okay. So thinking of that, this order has come in. You inform your broker, listen, currently the price is at 100. I expect it to go higher. Okay. But to be on the safe end, in case the price falls, you put a stop loss order at 90 or let's say 95. So the broker will put a stop loss order at 90. So the moment, let's say price is now declining, the price is now declining and hits 95. Let's say the stop loss order has been put at 95 and it reaches 95. Will your sell order get executed? No. That's the beauty of a stop loss order. Okay, even at 95, it doesn't get executed. But moment your stock hits 94, your entire 94 or 94.9, your entire trading will get executed at whatever the market price. Let's say stock hit 94.9, 98, immediate available price, your order will go through. That is what a stop loss in terms of a sell order. A stop loss buy order, think of the opposite. You want to buy a certain stock. Why do you buy a share? Your expectation is this share price will increase in the future. So better to buy now and get a capital gain. That is your understanding. That is your forecast. So thinking of that, you will want to buy a share. Okay. But let's say today I buy a share. Today the share price is at 60. Okay. So you think, no, there's still time for this stock to increase. Tomorrow it might come down a bit. I'll wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow when you approach the market, the price has gone up to 70. Day after it can hit 80, 90, and you will lose the trend. The increasing trend will be lost. Okay. That now you have not yet even invested in this stock. Okay. So monetary wise, do you end up in a loss? No. But opportunity wise, you're going to have a loss. Why? If I bought today at 60, and I don't know today, but if the price had increased in 2 days time to 80, I would have earned a profit. I lost that possibility or that probable profit by waiting for the price to come down for tomorrow. Okay. So in a stop loss buy order is, you inform your broker, okay, I want to buy this stock. I expect it to come down. But in case it goes up, okay, you put a stop loss buy order at 65. So the broker will input your order at 65. If the price tomorrow hits 65, your order will again not get executed. But moment it hits anything above 65, it can be 66, 67, 68, anything above 65, your order will get immediately executed. Okay, that is a stop loss order. Take profit order is where you are comfortable with the profit you earned. You don't want to wait until the profit increases further. Why? Because you know with every bullish market comes a bear market as well. I showed you the trend. I showed you the trend. With every bearish market, a bullish trend will follow. And with every bullish, there is a bear trend as well. Okay. So imagine, now this is after everything happened. By looking at a graph, we can make a decision. But imagine the person who is at this position, who invested at this point on May 11th at some price, let's say at 60 rupees. And if the market has, this is the overall market, okay? This is the all share price index. It shows how the entire market moves. We saw how the price indices were. And then let's say at this point, they can assume, look here, I have made comfortable profit. Let's get out before the market collapses. Okay. Now, that let's say investor got out at this point, he might regret a bit when he saw this peak. But when he saw this downfall, he'll be glad as well. Why? He made the timely decision. He's comfortable with the profit he made. Imagine an investor who bought at this point, or let's say who bought from that investor when he sold, and he must be holding until hoping market will go up further. But when he went through this decline and reached here, you can see there is no difference. This is 7,054, and again market was at 7,000 in January as well. So it will be a no profit, no loss to that investor. Okay, he would have lost the profit because he was greedy for a higher profit. Okay, so take profit order is something like that. You're comfortable with the profit that you are. You want to sell off and get out before the prices fall again. Okay, that is a take profit order. Then we go to the stock market indices today. So the stock market indices are available for you to understand how the entire market works. Okay. If you go here, see, by using the all share price index, I know how the entire stock market performed over the last year. It declined from March onwards due to the COVID. Then, now this is the peak of the lockdown, remember? Upon the lockdown release, market rebounded again. It had its positives, then reached its peak in January, and now again is having a decline. By using this one index, I can have an overall look on how the market performed. So this stock market this has to be index or indices are available for you to understand that. Now an index can represent a group of stocks or the entire market as well. Now, if you take Sri Lanka, we have two indices. One index is to represent the entire market. One index to denote a group of stocks only. Okay, and we will know what that is. Why do we have indices? So that we can measure and monitor the market movements. Okay, and it'll help us to measure how the wealth has increased over time. Now look at this diagram. Okay, this chart. Just by looking this chart, you can understand that from last year January until May, there was a reduction in wealth in most of the investors. They had huge losses. Okay, but from this point until beginning of this year, or even the entire month of January, you know that on an aggregate basis, the stock market investors had a positive rise. Okay. And now again, they are at a declining stage, facing a loss in their exposures. So by seeing the trend of the indices, we can have a way to understand the changes in the overall wealth in the market. Okay. And it is also important because the index is known to be a leading indicator of what could possibly happen in the economy. Now, again, when we go to this, you see this downfall, right? This downfall was due to the COVID-19 lockdown. When this happened, when this sharp decline happened, as you can see, this was February 28th, and we had the lockdown March 16th. If you can go and check any newspaper, I remember it correctly, March 16th. Okay. So you can see even at this point, the decline had already started. Okay. The downfall had already started. I think this was the time when they found the first patient in our country. Okay. So this index told us, look here, there's a warning situation. If the investors are scared about the possible impact of this new virus to the economy, which could be damaging. Okay. And if you see the economic GDP that followed it, you would definitely know the next quarter, we had a drop in our production levels in a country. So this shows an indication of what could be coming in the future. Now here you could see the uprise right over here. Still there was, during these times, still there was a COVID-19 threat. But still you could see that the market has been returning, had been performing well. Even during the second outbreak, you could see there is a minor dip, but the market didn't have a huge downfall. Why? They know that there are certain companies performing well. They were confident on the economy to perform well. So they had those results coming in the very last quarter of last year. So the index gave us an indication what could be possibly coming in the future. Is it going to be a good time in the future, or is it going to be a recessionary background in the future? Whether it's a recessionary or inflationary background, the indications are provided to you. Okay. Then you have indices. Why? To measure the performance of fund managers. Okay. Now, if you take this index, I know this is how the entire market works. It's like an average. Okay. But let me take a screenshot of this. So this is how the entire market performs. Okay. Now let's say there are two investment managers. Who are investment managers? You will learn that when you go to financial service providers lesson. But for now, understand that investment managers are responsible to manage a portfolio. They would have funds from a certain investor or investors or pool of investors who will give him money. The investment manager will invest that money in stocks, in the correct stocks, so that the ultimate investor or investors will have a higher profit. Okay. Now, a good investment manager, okay, a good investment manager should be capable enough to outperform the market. What do you mean by outperform the market? When the market has a downfall, obviously the investment manager's portfolio will also have a downfall. Okay. Now, this is how the entire market reacted. No? This is how the entire market had reacted. But let's say this is the index movement. Let's say the loss. This chart is going to tell the profit or the loss over time. Okay. Now, due to this movement, what happens? In the initial time, there is a loss. Let's say loss is at these levels. Okay, at the beginning, then loss is increasing, steep, and then recovering, and now moving up to the good profitability. Let's say this is how the market, the all share price index reacted. The profitability, the loss and the profitability being reported to you. Okay. Let's say the investment manager, one investment manager is able to record this performance. Okay, this is investment manager 1. Okay, let's say another investment manager has been able to record profit as this. Okay, who is the better manager here? Obviously, investment manager 1. Why? Compared to the market now, in this point in time, when the investment manager has been able to make a profit, the market is even at a loss. So he or she has been able to outperform the market. Even here, when the market is at such a big loss, the investment manager has been able to curtail the loss at a very low level. And when the market is earning a profit, the investment manager has been able to perform even a higher profit. Okay. But the investment manager too, starting, he's at a good position, better than the market. But due to some exposure in some share, their portfolio has had a very drastic decline, even worse than the stock market, which is aggregate of all stocks. Okay, the all share price index is an accumulation of all the stocks. Even worse than that performance, they've been able to record. And even when the market recovered, the portfolio performance of the investment manager too has not been able to get back to its normal level. Still, it's below what the market earns. Okay. So what does this show? The investment manager 1 has been able to pick good shares to invest rather than the investment manager 2. Because when you compare their performance, even with each other or even with the market, what do you mean by market? The all share price index. All share price index is the average price movement of all the stocks. So if one stock has been performing very well, one stock has been worse performing, when you average it out is what is shown in the all share price index. Okay. So if the investment manager 1 has purchased the best performing stock and the investment manager 2 has bought the worst performing stock, you can see that reflection in their performance. Okay. So to compare and to understand that, you need a index as your benchmark to measure the performance of these investment managers, portfolio managers, or even the fund managers. Okay. Finally, to provide the framework for the creation of index funds, which reflect the performance of a stock market. Index fund aims to replicate the performance of an index. Now, this word, I want you to just highlight this index funds. How this came about is when Warren Buffett made a claim. You should be knowing who Warren Buffett is. He is one of the renowned investors when it comes to stock markets. A lot of his wisdom strategies are what several of the investors follow. He made a claim once which said, now you can see these performance, right? These are all certain portfolios. This is certain portfolio which can have stock A, B, and C. This portfolio might have stock C, D, and Z. Okay, but this all share price index has all the stocks. So A to Z, all the stocks are available in the all share price index. So what Warren Buffett said was, he said, even though certain portfolios, certain funds are able to outperform the market, such outperformance is temporary. In the end, it is the stock market or it is the index that generates the highest return. Okay, so that led to the introduction of this thing called index funds. Okay, what happened is several fund managers introduced this thing called index fund, where they replicate a certain fund. Now let's say, for example, all share price index includes all the stocks from A to Z. Okay, let's say each of these, there are 26 stocks in this particular index, and all these stocks are included in calculation of this index. Okay, then this particular index fund will have to replicate the index now. Then this index will also invest in all the stocks of that index. So for example, from A to Z, whatever the stocks which are included in that index, in that stock market, the index fund will also go and invest. Remember, all the stocks and in the same proportions. If let's say the stock A accounts for 10% of that index, when you weight it, the same weightage is given in the fund as well. Why do they do that? So it has to replicate the index. Let's say I have an index fund based on all share price index. Okay. Let's say I have a fund based on the all share price index. This is the all share price index movement. Okay. If I have an index fund which replicates this, all the stocks in this index in the same proportions is what I should invest in. So what happens? My index performance will also, my fund performance will also be in the same way. Why? Because my index is based on the all share price index, is same as the all share price index. Okay, because it replicates that particular index. That's what you call an index fund. So for you to have index fund, definitely you should have an index in the stock market. So these are the users of having the index in a market. Next, we are going to see the different ways in these index or the indices are calculated. Now, this can be divided into two. Price weighted index, where you will use the stock price as your basis, or you can use value weighted or market capitalization based index. Okay, so broadly, two ways. One is only based on price, one is based on the market capitalization. Now, what's based on the market capitalization is the value weighted index and the free float adjusted market capitalization index. So there are two indices, two index, which are subcategories of the market cap based indices. Now, what is a price weighted index? Here, you are going to weigh the importance of a stock based on their prices. It is simple as that. Now, I told you in this index fund, if I am going to invest in A to Z just as the all share price index, the weightage of that index is what I would also have to use. Okay. So imagine the index follows the price index, the price weighted method. It shows that each stock is weighted or given its importance based on its price. Let's say there are 3 stocks in the entire stock market. One stock is 70 rupees, one stock is 10 rupees, one stock is 100 rupees. According to this price weighted index, highest weightage goes to the stock with the highest price. Lowest weightage goes to the stock with the lowest price. Okay, that is what a price weighted index is. Now, what is the drawback of these index? I am going to give importance for these companies, for these shares based on these prices. Okay, but am I considering the size of these companies? Now, if it's A, B, Z shares. Okay, so A, B, and Z, I don't know their sizes. B can be a huge conglomerate or a multinational company. Z can be just a newly listed company which only has one branch or very small in scale compared to B. Do I get that understanding with this? No. Okay. The understanding on the size is not available for me to see. Now, I told you B is a large company. Okay, a multinational company. I can see the size of that by using the price. Okay. Now, if it's a larger company, they will have a lot of shares in issue, right? A number of shares in issue would be very high, which means the number of trading that the investors do for a day is very, very high. Okay. So, if the investors are trading a particular company's share very, very frequently, okay, and if that price of that stock varies even a bit, it will have a huge impact on the stock market. Let's say 3 of us have a share and we are trading that stock, and when we trade, what happens? That stock price shows an increase. But because the number of trades or the shares traded is very, very low, that increase won't be that material. Let's say 10 million people are trading a stock. And if that stock shows even a smallest increase, because the number of shares traded is so high, the change will also be very, very high. Okay. So the impact on the stock market depends on the size as well. So that impact can I get from this price-based index? No, this is purely based on price. Okay. So understanding those drawbacks, they introduce the market capitalization index. What is that? Now, not only the price, I will also consider the number of shares in issue. Okay. I will multiply these two variables and get the market capitalization. And using the market capitalization, I will give the weightage to the company. So obviously the company which is very large in scale would have a higher market capitalization. The company which has a large number of shares in outstanding will have a larger market capitalization. Okay, so according to the market cap, they give the weightage. But what happened there is there was a drawback in the market capitalization as well. That's why the introduction to the free float adjusted market capitalization came. Okay, what's the drawback in a market capitalization index? You will be wondering. Because first one only based on the price, we rectified it now by considering the shares as well. Now we are looking at both the price and the shares in outstanding, which means we are looking at the market capitalization. It should be correct, right? But what happened is they noticed that certain stocks, even though it has a very high market capitalization, in this scenario like the stock B, huge company, very huge market capitalization, they noticed, let's say now this is in design millions, the market capitalization is 1,000 million, which means 1 billion, this is 100 million, and this is 70 million. Okay. This is how the market capitalization is. But let's assume even though the company B has 1 billion market capitalization, B's 80% of B stocks, okay, 80% of B stocks are held by the parent company. Let me, okay. Let's say this has 700 million. And let's say this has 1,000 million. This has 500. Okay, market cap. Now here, 80% is held by parent company. Here, 60% is held by owner. Okay. Here, let's say 50% is held by owner. Now, you should understand why do these people have this kind of holdings? What is their motive behind it? Now, if you hold, let's say you hold HNB shares, what is your motive behind it? Are you looking to be a owner or a huge promising principal shareholder of HNB and controlled HNB? No, you might be buying that stock for capital gain, for dividends. You just want to earn a return and get out. Okay, but these people own this stock to exert control, to retain their ownership. Their interest is on the company's business activities and they want to maintain their ownership and control. Therefore, will these parties actively trade their stocks? Will they come to the stock market and buy and sell their holdings? No. They will have their shares with them as their permanent investment. They are like the ultimate owners. Their main interest is on this company. They want to grow this company. That is their interest. Their objective is not to earn a quick return and get out, or hold the shares for 5 years, earn a profit and get out. No. Their ultimate objective is make sure the company grows. Okay. So if they are not going to trade in the stock market, okay, if they are not actively trading in the stock market, what happens? It is the balance that is going to trade in the stock market. So here, if you take this scenario, 40% will be actively traded. Here, 20% will be actively traded. Here, 50% will get actively traded. Okay. So what is the benefit that comes from it? Let's say out of 20% from this, let's say that means only 200 million market capitalization. In market capitalization terms, comes from the individual investors. Here again another 200 million comes. Let's say for this example, let's make this as 10%, so it can be 100 million. Here it will be 350. Okay. Okay. So you can understand, by only these small percentages being able to actively trade in the market, now the impact of certain stock in the stock market is going to vary. Even though the share B has 1 billion market capitalization, only the change or the impact it creates in the stock market comes from only that 100 million market capitalization. Let's say some kind of change happened in that 100 million, whether that 100 million market capitalization became 200 or 50 million, that change is minute compared to the impact that comes from 350 million or even 200 million. Okay. So that allowed investors or the regulatory authorities to come up with the index so that it is calculated based on the free float. What is this word free float? It determines the number of shares which is publicly available so that the public can easily trade. It disregards or it excludes the number of shares that is held by government or promoters of that company, owners of that company. Why? Their view is not to actively trade. Okay. Therefore, that is excluded. The number of shares which is freely available for the public to trade is what they would consider in calculating the free float adjusted market capitalization. So here you have price weighted index, value weighted or the market capitalization weighted index, and the free float market capitalization index. Now this, you don't get calculations from it, but understand the basis, how that index is calculated for your understanding purposes. Now, this is a calculation which comes with the index. This is only for your understanding purpose. Okay. Now, here you can see in the price weighted index, these are the prices of the shares. This is the price on January 1st, 2000. This is the today's price. Here, according to which company has the highest price, the weightage will differ. Why? You are going to add the prices of all the stocks, which is going to be 500. You can see here. Okay, I hope this is clear. So here you can see it is the addition of all the shares that is in the stock market. Okay, assume there are only 3 shares in the stock market. So you will add the prices of all the stock market, 500, and you will use to get the weightage of each. So this is 150 rupees, this particular share's price. That out of 500 is how much of a weightage? Is 30%. 100 out of 500 is 20. 250 out of 100 is 50%. So which has the highest weightage? The company with the highest price. Which has the lowest weightage? The company with the lowest price. Okay. So using that, you are going to calculate the index. Market capitalization weighted index. Now, market capitalization meaning shares into the market price. Now, here we are going to look at January 1st, 2000 market capitalization. So, you have the price, you have the number of shares. Now, here you will look at the total number of shares in issue or whatever that amount that is there for the trading in the stock market to be listed. Okay, which is the entire stocks in issue. So, you will use the total number of stock and multiply price into shares and calculate the market capitalization. That's going to be step 1. First, calculate the market cap. Then, according to the market capitalization, now you're going to give the weightage. Now, here you can see these 2 companies have the highest market cap. So, these 2 will have equal weightages, but higher than this particular share. Okay. Again, here also what you do, you will add all the market capitalization, which will be at 8 billion. Okay. Sorry, I think these are in million. So 8 million. And out of 8 million, how much is this? So 3 out of 8 is 38. Again, this at 38. 2 out of 8 is at 25. So you can see the highest market cap company will get the higher weightage. Okay. Now, out of this, now this is the value weighted or the market capitalization index. Let's say we are going to see the free float adjusted. They will have to give you the number of shares in public holding. Now, this is 20,000 shares in issue. Let's say they say 60% of this is held by the owners or promoters of the company. Okay. Now, do you get 60% from it? No. You need to see the free float. So, not just multiplying by the ownership held, 100 minus the 60. Okay. You want to see the amount that is publicly held. So, ideally, you need to calculate the 40%. That will be 8,000. Remember, number of shares you are going to take into consideration is the number of shares under free float. If they say owner holds 60%, disregarding the 60%, what is the balance? 40. Okay. Now here, let's say they say 50, let's say 65% is held with the promoters, which means 35% is the free float. Here again, let's say they mentioned 55% is held with the promoters, then free float of 45 is what you will look at. Okay. Now, according to free float number of shares, free float number of shares, you will calculate the free float market cap. Okay. So according to this, which has the highest free float market cap? The very first company. So it will end up with a higher weightage. And the company with the lowest free float market cap will get the lower weightage. Okay. I hope you understood. Okay, no any question. Now you will be wondering whether such free float can be seen publicly for you. Now if you go to a certain company in our stock exchange, you can see the financials of that company, annual and even quarterly. Let's go to the December quarterly. December quarter, every quarter end, they need to disclose their shareholder information. Okay. At that time, who were the shareholders who were holding this? Now you can see these parties are essentially the promoters, like related parties of the promoters who hold that particular company. Okay. Now, sometimes if you know you know about the stock or you know about the companies very well, that particular investor can identify what is free float, what is not. But let's say it's a brand new investor who has no knowledge about this. It will be difficult for them to pick out who is the promoter, who is a related party of the promoter. Okay. So in that case, the companies are mandated to disclose the public holding. Now here you will have the public holding in terms of value and in terms of the percentage is given here. Okay. So out of the total shares in issue, which is 1 billion, if you take the public holding percentage, you should be good to go. Then we have stock valuation. What is stock valuation? We have bond valuation as well, where we looked at how to value a particular bond. Now here, we are not going to learn how to value a stock in terms of calculations, but we are going to learn how to value a stock in terms of its methods. Okay. What are the two approaches available for you to value a certain stock? Okay. Now, before we go to this, I want you to understand certain aspects. Now, when you are going to value a stock, a share, what does a share mean? We saw that a share meaning a ownership of a company. Share of a company represents the ownership. It ideally represents a part of that company, the ownership interest. Okay. So when you are going to value that share, the value of that share is going to depend on that particular company. If the company is going to perform bad, is going to have losses, okay, you as an investor, will you get dividends from that company? No. Will you at least get your investment out of that company on winding down? You never know. There is uncertainty if the company is continuously making losses and they have to wind down the company, you might not end up with anything. Okay. That is important. Just understand how the thinking goes like that. Okay. So if the company is going to perform well, if the company's future is going to be in comfortable position, you know the stock value would be at a at least a bit higher on a stable level. So for you to value your stock, you might have to study how the company would perform. Okay, that is one way of thinking. Another set of investors believe, rather than, now I don't have to study what the company is doing and everything. I'm not going to own the company now. If my intention is to get dividend from that company, if my intention is to hold that company share for let's say 2 to 3 years, then good, study about the company and make an informed decision. But let's say you have a certain investors who are traders. They have what is the objective of a trader? Buy today, sell tomorrow at a higher price. If you are going to make such quick profit, will you even care how the company will be in the future? No. What you would study is, compared to yesterday's price, has today's price dropped? Will this trend continue tomorrow, or will it take a U-turn and go up again? Okay. So a trader will study the price movement of that stock. What is the highest price that stock has hit? What is the lowest price that stock has hit? What is the price today? Is it a good point for me to buy now, or is it a good point to sell out and move out? Okay. So for a trader, their view is when to put the money in and when to get out. Okay. And they will study the price movement, the volume movement. How many shares were sold yesterday? Day before yesterday, how many shares? Which means if there is an increasing number of shares in trading, that means that something is happening in the stock. So many people are buying and selling. Quantity is getting very high. That means there's some positive sentiment in the market. Price might go up. Okay. So they will read these information to make a valuation of that company's share. Okay. So using these two approaches, they will ultimately have a forecast in their mind, which would be the value of that stock. Now, what are these two approaches I explained? One is fundamental analysis, which is very elaborate, very in-depth. You will study about the company. Actually, you will first look at the economy. Okay. You will study about the economy. You will understand what are the priority sectors of the government, how the government views certain sectors. Now, even during a budget, what sector is preferred more, what sector has the highest benefit. Then you will study about that sector. How is this sector structured? Who are the competitors? What are the entry difficulties and the exit difficulties of this company? Can anyone get into this sector, or should you have certain license to get into this sector? The overall industry analysis is done. Not only that, sometimes it goes into depth of understanding the target market, the size of the target market. Can a foreign competitor come in? Everything is done at an industry level. Then you will look at the company. Out of this industry, what is the best performing market leader? Who is the close rival? Who is the worst performing company? Can the worst performing company turn around and become a good performing company? Or let's say you fixated your mind on the market leader or the close rival. Then you will study about that rival company in depth. Who are the owners? Who are the market segments that they cater? Who are their purchase suppliers? How do they source the raw material for their production? Where do they do the production? How is it priced? Everything about that company, from the process to the product being delivered to the customer, you will know the entire process. You will understand the future. Then you will go and understand the future outlook of the company. You will talk to the management of the company and say, okay, we know this is how your company has been performing. So what are you going to do in the future? Do you have certain contracts, let's say from abroad? Are you getting any tax concession? Are you expanding, putting up a factory? Did you get any new customer segments? Did you maybe attract some of your competitor customers? That is how you will see the fundamental analysis. Technical analysis, your focus, I told you, is going to be on price and volume of that stock only. That also on the past performance. Why? In technical analysis, the traders look for a short-term gain, right? So they are under the assumption or under the belief that the past performance of the stock will continue or will get repeated. Okay, so they will study the past performance, draw certain trend charts, and understand where the stock price will move. Okay, now here I have given you elaborate write up on what each one means. This is the summary or the comparison between these two. So you have fundamental analysis, which studies the pattern of the financial performance of a company. Not only that, along with the economic and the industrial setting. But what does technical analysis look at? They look at the past pattern of the share price only. What does the fundamental analysis look for? What are they trying to predict? They try to predict the future performance of the company. How? Through the forecasted financial performance. They will use the financial performance to make a prediction about the future. Technical analysis also, you're looking the future performance, you're trying to predict the future performance. But what are you going to use it with or through how? Using the past patterns of the share price. You believe that the past patterns of the share price will get repeated. In fundamental analysis, you look for qualitative and quantitative factors. Not only the financials of the company that you will study, you will have a lot of qualitative factors to have a look for. But technical analysis, you are going to look at both the price and the volume of the shares traded. Now, when you study this, you can see technical analysis is usually high risk. Imagine you are buying a certain stock purely based on the past pattern. It is high risk. Who is willing to take such a high risk? A trader, let's say someone who is willing to take such a high risk is a person who wants a higher return in a shorter period of time. Okay, so essentially the timing of investment is going to be very short term. Why you buy today, sell tomorrow, that kind of a mentality. So that is more suited for traders or investors who engage in active trading. There are some traders in the stock market who buy today and sell today itself. They buy in the morning, sell before the market closes. That is the active trading that they do. Okay. Investors, what are they trying to do now? You will do so much of research about this company. You forecast how that company is going to be in the next 5 years. Why? Because you are looking to hold the shares of that company for at least another 3 to 4 years. That's why you're doing a thorough understanding of 5 years, right? Future 5 years. Okay. So fundamental analysis is mostly used by investors when they are looking for a longer term investment. Okay, so who is it going to be used by? Investors, not traders, and the time of investment is usually long term. Now let me show you this chart. Now this this is when I was an analyst and did it way back 2014-15. Okay, So when you do share valuation, you need to do an in-depth study, okay, on the financials, everything. So this is the past financials of a company. We forecast for 2 years because the company I worked for looked for active trading only for the horizon was very small. Minimum of 2 years is what they look at. So a 2-year forecast is what we give preference for. And then using that, you try to predict the price of the stock. Now you'll be wondering how come this had a huge growth as this, because this company lost a huge number of contracts and was recovering at this point. Okay. So what do? You'd have in-depth workings. Okay. Now this is not easy. Fundamental analysis is very, very tough. Each line item you will understand individually. Now, when you calculate revenue, especially the past revenue, you will see how much is coming from main sales. What kind of a quantity did they sell? What is the average price? Okay, what is their factory capacity? How much are they operating it at? Okay, and what is the price per meter? When you're coming for cost of sales, you will definitely have to know your cost per meter. What is that company's cost per meter? That cost will be a total cost. So you break it down into raw material and energy. You will see the very high priority line items when it comes to stock. Okay. So, sorry, when it comes to cost of sales, the big two composition of the cost of sales, you will study in depth. Then you will see whether this price movement is in line with the raw material price globally. Now, this is a fabric company which was dependent on cotton. So, you will analyze their trend in the raw material prices with the global cotton prices. So, if you see a trend, when the global cotton prices move, you know what will happen to this company. Okay, that kind of a very detailed forecast is what you would do. Now, when you come to the forecast, it's going to be even worse. Why? You need to know how the economy is doing. You need to know whether the government is favorable for this company. Okay, now this is a fabric company. And at this point is when they were getting the GSP back. Okay, so when they get the GSP back, have they already secured any UK customers, any US customers? Okay, and what were the quantities of that orders? All of these you need to know. Now, all of these are qualitative information as well. Are they getting the GSP back? Is the government positive on that? Those qualitative as well reflect on the future performance in terms of better returns. Okay, so using all that, you calculate, you come up with your forecast, and ideally end up with the forecasted share price. Now, what happens in technical analysis? You can see here, blue is the all share price index. Okay, that shows the market movement, and red shows the share price of this particular stock. Okay, share price of this particular stock. So you can see this stock has been underperforming, but now during recent time, it has been able to outperform how the market works. It has been able to outperform the market. Okay, which shows like a positive sentiment towards this stock. Now, looking at this, looking at the trend of this and the volumes, now you can see at this point, I don't know whether it's very clear for you. Now, this green essentially shows you the volume. Okay, the green shows you volume. You can see up until now, this point, the stocks were underperforming in comparison to the all share price index. So, moment it had its highest stock amount getting traded, you can see how the trend went back to a better position. The price of this share started recovering. Now, these are learning points or indicative points to a trader using technical analysis. Okay. They know at this point, is the share overpriced, underpriced. Okay. This is going to be their platform of, this is the information that they're going to use to trade in the stock market. Okay. Now you might wonder, is it like so, hard and fast rule so that the investor can never use a technical analysis, a trader can never use a fundamental analysis? No. In practical scenario, now this is what you theoretically learn. Okay. Practical world, when you see investors who depend more on fundamental analysis, you also use technical analysis. Why? Because using technical analysis, the investor can see whether the price that the share is getting traded at the moment, is it overpriced or underpriced? Or is it a good time to buy the stock now? Or shall I wait a bit now? I know this company is going to perform well. Okay. But now the information I know, everybody in the market will know as well, right? Remember, information efficiency in the market. So when everybody demands, obviously the stock price will start to move up. Okay. So investors can use technical analysis to understand whether it's a good time to enter at the moment, or shall I wait a bit until the hype is over and then get into the stock. And after they invest, technical analysis could tell the investor at what point to sell out and get out. Okay, now after you have already bought the share, you will wait until the stock price is overpriced, right? It is overpriced, you can sell at a higher price. Okay, so technical analysis will show you when the stock is under or overpriced. So you know when the stock is overpriced, good time, let's get out. Okay, so entry and exit points can be learned or can be understood by investors as well. Similarly, traders can also use fundamental analysis to pick out what shares are good. Now, if they know this company is strong, the forecast of the company is very positive, why not get into that company and try to make a quick return? Okay, so in the practical world, both these analyses are used by both investors and traders when they use for their decision, when they decide on what stocks to pick and what not to pick. Okay, so with that, we wind up the last week class in full. Okay, and then we move to Colombo Stock Exchange. So this is what we studied in the entire snapshot. So what is Colombo Stock Exchange? It is the Sri Lanka's capital market, and it is the licensed operator of the stock exchange. Okay, they are the ones who are allowed to act as the stock exchange in Sri Lanka. Do we have multiple stock exchanges? No, we just have one, which is Colombo Stock Exchange. Who is regulating the Colombo Stock Exchange? Securities and Exchange Commission, which we will learn as well. Okay, CSE is operated for over 30 years and it's a company limited by guarantee. Now, this is the structure of Colombo Stock Exchange. So under Colombo Stock Exchange, you have two companies, which is Central Depository System and CSE Clear, which provides the clearing and the settlement. But recently they closed down this So currently you do not have CSE clear as part of the Colombo Stock Exchange. What are the products traded in the Colombo Stock Exchange? We have equities, we have debt products, remember debentures, okay. Then you have exchange traded products and structured products such as warrants, close-ended funds, REITs, exchange traded funds. Okay. Now what you need to understand is, even under equities, you can see LKR denominated equity and multi-currency equity. Now, these are the forex equities. Okay. You can see the asterisk here. Okay. This multi-currency equity, REITs, exchange traded funds are to be introduced in the future. Now, very last year, we had REITs being introduced and we had multi-currency equity board being introduced. Okay. LKR denominated equity shares, we already have. All our shares in the stock market is denominated in rupees. You also have warrants in our stock exchange. Warrants is an instrument given by the company to its existing shareholders, so they can buy new shares of that company at a specified price and at a specific time. Now, how is it different from a rights issue? Both of them you give it to existing shareholders, but when it comes to warrants, the validity of a warrant is available for a longer time than the rights. Rights have to be exercised quickly. Warrants, the validity period is higher, but when the warrant expires, the investor has to buy the stock. Okay. Having a warrant will only give you the right to buy. Okay. You have to buy the warrant and then exercise the warrant to actually get the shares. What is another difference when it comes to warrant is, now rights, remember, it is given at a discounted price than the market price. If the market price is 10 rupees, rights get issued at 8 or anything below 10. Sorry. Okay. Warrants, what happens is, they issue at a price higher than the market price initially. Okay. Initially, it is higher than the market price. If it's 10, they will issue the warrant at 12 rupees. It will give you the right to buy the shares from the company at 12 rupees. Okay. What will happen is that will eventually drive the market price of the stock from 10 towards 12 or even higher than 12, closer to 13 or 14. That's what actually happens. Why? If the company is going to issue the stock at a higher price, it shows the belief that the company is going to be performing well. Okay. So warrant is another category when it comes to the stock exchange. Then you have closed-ended funds. Closed-ended funds are unit trusts which are listed in the stock exchange. If you go to our stock exchange and search Candor, I think Candor Fund is, yeah, here you can see Candor Opportunities Fund. Now then listed any, then you have Namal Equity Fund. Okay. All these are the closed-ended equity. Sorry, closed-ended funds. Then you have REITs. What are REITs? Real Estate Investment Trust. It's a new vehicle or new investment vehicle being introduced. You need to understand what that is, at least have an understanding, probable short note questions or even MCQs out of that. And then you have exchange traded funds as well, which is going to be introduced. And then finally, you have corporate debt or debentures listed in our stock exchange. Now, this REITs was introduced last year July. And it's important for two reasons. One is it was introduced last year, new to our country. But if you take real estate investment trust, it was introduced in US in 1960. Okay, see how old it is. So we are introducing it only in 2020, pretty late back. Okay, so that is one reason, newly introduced. Second is it is the newly introduced product in our stock exchange after 23 years. Last what they introduced was the debenture in 1997, if I'm correct. Yeah, 1997 they introduced debentures, and in 2020 they introduced real estate investment trust. It's a fairly new product to our market, so it's possible that they expect you to have a good understanding. Okay, you can see this article. Now, what is real estate investment trust? Okay, when you see the term, I have so many students, even in my last session, when they hear the term, they get scared, they get confused. I didn't have to explain, even by looking at the name, they have that feeling. Okay, it's one of the easiest investment, but let me first explain you how it works. Okay, now take a standalone investor. Okay, standalone investor who wants to earn a higher income. Okay, they invest in debentures, in equities, and another possible avenue that they can invest is real estate. What do you mean by real estate? You have either houses, you have apartments that you can buy, give it for rent, or buy and sell it at a higher price. Okay, that is how the conventional real estate investment works. Now, what is the difficulty in this is, you and I both know real estate is a investment which has a continuous increase in its prices, especially in the last decade, or even if you take the last 20 years especially, the real estate prices have been growing. Okay, so currently, I'm pretty sure you should be knowing the market rates at the moment. Let's assume you want to buy an apartment in Shangri-La, in one Golf Face, closer to one Golf Face, you want to buy an apartment. As per my knowledge, you should have minimum 150 million to buy an apartment there. Okay, and let's say you want to buy it and give it for rent to foreigners or in dollar terms, but still your investment is this much. Okay, you don't want to go to that, you don't have that money. Let's say you want to buy a house. You want to buy a house in Colombo 7. How much is a house in Colombo 7? It can be pretty decent, higher than 200 million as well if you go for a good house. Okay. Now, what does this show? That unless the investor is a high net worth investor who can afford this price, majority of the others cannot. So what will happen? They will lose out on this increasing property prices. Whenever an asset price is growing, that's an opportunity for the investor to invest in that asset and get a gain. Correct? So because they are unable to make that initial investment, they will lose out. That is from the investor perspective. Okay. What comes from the other side is, the parties who put up these apartments, parties who make such houses, they also want their units to get sold off. Okay. But if they know that these investors, only a few of the investors can actually afford for this. Now, let's say there's an apartment complex or apartment building with a lot of apartments, let's say 10 apartments, and only 5 are able to afford that apartment. What happens to the other 5 units? The construction company or the property owner will have to wait until he gets a buyer who can afford it. He can't reduce the price because the others who bought it would demand for a lesser price as well. Okay. So for the property owners, they lose out from the possible demand that they could have got. Okay. To rectify this situation, you have the real estate investment trust coming. Okay. Now, what do they do? Not just one investor, a lot of investors. Okay, a lot of investors will get together, pool the relevant money, and will now invest in real estate. Okay, essentially, that's what happens in a real estate investment trust. Now, in between, you have several parties, but snapshot, that's what happens. I can't individually afford an apartment, let's say in Shangri-La. Okay. I have only, let's say we have only 1/3 of, only 30% of the money. I approach you for the 40. I approach you for the balance 30. 3 of us get together and buy that apartment. Okay. Pool the funds and buy. And whatever the income it generates, we would split according to the investment amount. Now, when you do it privately, several issues comes. Who is the owner of the apartment? Okay, so when there is any unfair practices on distributing the profit, there is no one to intervene. Okay, therefore it became a institutionalized and a regulated product. All these investors will now pool the funds and give it to a management company. Now, the management company will take the funds and invest in the property. And when the property earns rent, capital appreciation in any sort, those are then distributed by the company to the investors. That is simply how a real estate investment trust works. Okay, here we have the diagram of it. I don't think I could zoom in. Let's see. Okay, somewhat better. Now here what happens? You have the real estate here. Okay, these are the investors. Okay, So the investor will now put the money or hand over the money to the managing company. Okay, managing company. The managing company, what do they manage? They manage the real estate investment trust, something like a portfolio. Okay, whatever the money, now they have a portfolio of real estate. They might have one apartment in Shangri-La, one apartment in Altair, two, three apartments in Colombo City Center. Okay, that is their portfolio. Okay, that is the trust which has the particular investment here. Okay. Now, can you trust that the management company could be working for all the interest of the unit holders, or can you ensure that there is no any discrepancies and unfair practices? To ensure that you have a trustee, to ensure that the unit holders or the, sorry, not here unit holders, the investors are not at a disadvantage. Okay, so the trustee will make sure that the managing company and the investments abide by the rules and regulations. You also have someone called property manager. Who is this property manager? They are available to look after the property, to ensure that the property is at a marketable condition. Okay, that is their role. Now, who are the regulators? You have the Securities and Exchange Commission giving the overall framework on how a managing company should be and how a trust should be managed. And both of them, the company should be licensed by the Security Exchange and the trust should be approved by the Security Exchange. Then you have Colombo Stock Exchange, where these the trust is listed under. Okay, now this something like assume this trust has shares, so those shares are listed in the stock exchange. Okay, so investor who already has them can continue to have them, or he can trade as well. Okay, that is allowed in the Colombo Stock Exchange. Now in Sri Lanka, they have advised for this structure to be done under a unit trust method. Unit trust method. Okay, what happens in the unit trust? Under this trust, now just as a company has shares, this trust will have smaller portions. Now you can't call them shares, you call them units. Okay, that's why here the investor is called a unit holder. Ultimately, what you are trying to do is you are trying to pool funds from the unit holders or the investors. The company will pool the funds and the managing company will invest using the trust in the asset classes. You have a trustee to oversee the company and the investment, and a property manager to ensure that the property is in a marketable condition. Okay. Now, these are certain factors that you need to know. In our stock exchange, when you have in our regulatory background, if it's a real estate investment trust, it has to be listed. You cannot have unlisted real estate investment trust. Why do they have this regulation? Because if not, a lot of the investors could be misled. Okay, if they are listed, then there are certain rules and regulations and the managing company has to abide by them. Okay, if it's not, the lot of investors could get cheated on. Okay, now under real estate investment trust, if the managing company is investing in a property, it has to be fully completed property. Okay, it cannot be half built property or just foundation laid apartment. No, it has to be fully completed property that is available for sale. Okay, now that property can be either fully occupied or even partially occupied. That they don't mind, but the apartment should be fully built. Okay, and it should be generating a income. You cannot buy a dud asset or asset that doesn't generate any income. Now the trust can either outright purchase the properties or buy it on lease as well. Okay, and what kind of properties can they buy? Now abroad you have real estate investment trust categorized according to the type of property. Okay, you have residential real estate investment trust, which means in that trust all the investments are made in residential properties. You have houses, you have apartments, and only that. Then you would have commercial real estate investment trust. So if you have invested in certain properties for commercial purposes, you want to give it as an office complex or you want to give it as a warehouse. Okay, so that is under commercial category. You even have real estate investment trust for hotels, hospitals, and even infrastructure projects like power plants and all. Okay, but in here they allow property under any category. Okay, under any category is allowed to be invested under a listed real estate investment trust. Now this gives you an overall idea on what are the benefits to the company, what is a managing company and what are their requirements, what are the documents, who is a trustee, who is a sponsor. Sponsor is an intermediary party who currently owns the property but is going to transfer it to the managing company. He's going to sell it to the managing company. Then you have property managers. Their duty is to make sure that the property or the real estate is in a marketable condition. Compliance officer to ensure that the managing company is complying to all the regulation. Then you might have construction contractors, valuers, and so forth. Okay. Now here you can see the trust. I told you trust is something like a portfolio. Portfolio meaning an aggregation of all the assets that you hold. Now here the real estate investment trust is allowed to invest in this proportion. In their portfolio, 80% has to be in real estate. Apartment, houses, hospital, hotel, any form, but 80% only. 20% has to be liquid. Now, are the real estate liquid assets? No, you can't sell it immediately. So, they want at least 20% of the fund to be in cash. It can be in FD, savings, or even government securities. Okay. Why do they do that? So that the trust is having a healthy balance. In case they have any unnecessary withdrawals, they can pay out without going into a liquidity crisis. Now, in case the company wants to invest higher than 80%, they have to approach who is the regulator, Securities and Exchange Commission. They have to approach the regulator and ask for prior permission before they invest. They cannot make the investment and then ask for permission. Important. Okay. They have several fees, but all the fees should be less than or equal to 4% of the total value of the REIT. These are all the other information available on the real estate investment trust. Okay. What are the benefits of a REIT? Understand that this gives the investor affordability. Now, if all three of us invest and buy an apartment, all three of us are owner of a real estate property. Earlier, standalone, I couldn't afford. So it provides an affordability element to the small scale investors so that they can benefit from the increasing property prices. Okay. And when it is listed real estate investment trust, they could buy it anytime, they could sell it anytime as well. Okay, so they can sell the units, their ownership in that particular trust, they could buy it and sell it immediately. And another important characteristic is, in a real estate investment trust, even Sri Lanka or even abroad, the understanding is 90%, minimum 90% of the income that is generated from that investment in the real estate should go out to the investors. The managing company cannot retain more than 10%. Okay, let's say they, whatever the income they earn is 1,900,000, they have to pay out as dividends to their investors. So imagine the amount of return that they would get. It is very high, 90% payout on the income. Okay, 90% payout ratio. Okay, so the investors will get a higher return as well. Okay, and the return that they get is based on the proportion that they hold. If I hold 50%, and let's say 1 million is the total income that the managing company earned. Okay, out of the 1 million, 900,000 is going to be the payout. Now, if I hold 50% of the units, I will get 450,000. If you hold 10%, you will get 90,000. So the benefit depends on the exposure to the REIT as well. Now, these are the eligibility criteria when you are going to list the stock, list the real estate investment in our stock exchange. The REIT is mandated to be managed by a managing company who is licensed. Okay. Listing application should be submitted within 1 month. All units issued have to be listed. Okay, not part, all units have to be listed, and all units should be fully paid and should be free from any lien, and should be easily transferred. The units shouldn't be mortgaged or should not be restrained from easily transferring that. Okay, the value of the real estate assets owned by a REIT at the time of listing should be at least 500 million. So it's a very stronger, the quantum is at a very strong level. Okay, and at least 20% of the units should be held by minimum 100 unit holders when it's at the time of listing, on the day they come for listing. At least 20% of their units which is in issue should be bought by at least 100 unit holders. Okay, that is the point. Then sponsor or strategic investor must hold a minimum of 30 total units, which is locked in for 6 months from the date of listing. Now, sponsor is who? The party who owns the property, who is hoping to sell the property to the managing company. Okay, so as per regulation, the sponsor should hold 30% of the units. He should sell the property and in turn hold 30% units of that trust, but they should hold it only for 6 months. After that, minimum of 6 months, and after that they could cash in the profit and get out. Okay, that is real estate investment trust, for your knowledge. The probable area that they can get tested. Now, next week when we come back, we will study the different boards which are available in our stock exchange. We will see how each of their listing criteria is different, and then how debt is listed in our stock exchange. Then you have the 2 indices in our market. What is the total return index in our market? The GIS classification in our market. And then you have the circuit breakers introduced last year. What are these circuit breakers? Why do we have circuit breakers? Okay, so next week, let's again join in to study rest of this. I hope you understood what we discussed today. Thank you so much for listening.